Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we got to go back out to practice today, watch like a full, honest to goodness, full practice. Have a lot to talk about, lots of new pictures to show everyone. It's pretty exciting.
It is exciting. It was good to be back for full practice. However, I must complain a little because that's what we do. Or at least that's what I do. It was not a very long practice. Although, and the reason I can complain about it not being a very long practice is also because it wasn't that hot out. It was pretty nice out. So, it was in the low 70s. Nice time to sit out and watch some football. But it wasn't like a 17 or 18 period practice. But no, again, if this sounds like me complaining about an open practice and being able to see our one open practice a year, it's totally not. It's totally not. That's not what I'm doing here. I would never do that. But yes, definitely good to get to practice. And so when we get to see practice, then we come here and we talk about it and share everything that we can remember that we saw, all of the notes we took, all of the things that we saw and heard. And really the best way to do this is just go position by position because that's the easiest way to remember it. And really quarterback, I don't know how much time we need to spend on it. Nothing is new. It's still C.J. Stroud, then Kyle McCord, then Devin Brown. I did see C.J. Stroud throw a really bad interception to J.K. Johnson today. Concerns?
Significant concerns, maybe. I mean, and these practices are fun because we are very responsibly scribbling down. Here's who's working with who, and oh look, here's the first team, here's the second team, and then C.J. Stroud's at one point out there with a walk-on. It's like, did a walk-on get promoted to first team wide receiver, or did C.J. Stroud get busted down to fourth team? Either one is possible.
Well, you throw an interception that bad, things are going to happen. So yeah, and that's another interesting part. As everybody gets to see practice, everybody is putting their depth charts together, and like when you see a certain series or whatever determines whether you think somebody is starting. And then when you see like C.J. Stroud has Reese Stocksdale or whatever in there with him, it's like we try to reiterate this as often as we can. They mix a bunch of people in there at all times. They're just rotating guys. They want to practice quickly, and they want to get it done. Kyle McCord had a nice throw down the seam to Xavier Johnson, who had a pretty good day as well. And Devin Brown, it was hard to see when they get down at the far end who's throwing, but like nothing worth worrying about at this point. Everybody's fine. The passing game is going to be okay. I think quarterback is settled, and the running game, the running backs, they did some inside drills today, which is it's messy. It's physical, and Travion Henderson was running with the ones. Obviously, I don't even know if we saw Mayan Williams do anything in that because Evan Pryor was in there with the twos, and I don't know that they went to Mayan Williams at all. And sometimes they're just giving guys breaks. They're letting guys rest. And again, today was not the most difficult practice. But, so they're working on that physicality. Now that they're all in pads and everything, they can do that. And the thing Ryan Day said afterwards is, because the defensive line was winning a lot of those battles, but he said it's not necessarily about the offense or defense who wins it as to, are you happy? Are you sad? It's you go back and you look, this is about the one-on-ones. And did the guys win the one-on-ones? And did they do everything that they were supposed to? And if so, then you're graded well, and then you're happy. And early returns, the defensive line has been getting some good raves, and it was not there's nothing easy for the running backs to do. The best running back, the most successful running back I saw today was Dallin Hayden during the young guys drill. The young guys portion of practice. After about practice 13, the veterans all, they gave the veterans the rest of the day off, and then they did some 11-on-11s with the young guys, and I saw Dallin Hayden having some success there against fellow young guys.
Yeah, and I think you're sort of limited in how much you're really going to see from the running backs during the stuff that we're doing, because when they're doing an inside run drill, guess what? The defense also knows it's an inside run drill. So the defense knows what you're trying to do. So that probably makes things a little more difficult. And you're right. We'll get to the defensive line in a minute, but there was some interior push there, and that can be, you can look at that as an optimist and say, wow, the defensive line is great. Or you can look at that as a pessimist and say, ooh, boy, is that good for the, what does that mean for the interior of the offensive line? And, I think it's reasonable to think that it could just be the defensive line might be that good. The offensive line was, is I think we have a sense is going to be at least solid. And if you're getting pushed against a solid offensive line, okay, that's probably a good thing. As for the running back chat, I did see Mayan Williams out there. He had, he was doing drills. He was not limited in any way. So I don't remember specifically whether he ran anything in that drill, but, we did see him doing stuff. So, I don't think there's any cause for concern there. Saw Evan Pryor, saw Travion Henderson. I think everyone looked about as they should, and saw Travion Henderson catching a couple passes at one point, and Travion Henderson in the open field still looks like a thing that Ohio State fans will probably enjoy watching this fall. So that's probably a good thing for people to be excited about.
Ooh, another bold prediction from Tom Orr. Let's talk about the receivers, because I have been the only person on the Caleb Brown hype train. I'm the only one on it. I'm driving it. I'm back making the caboose, making sure the caboose is okay. I'm, the food cart area, I'm just running this whole train by myself because nobody else likes this guy. True freshman wide receiver. Saw him early with a nice move after it's quick screen, nice move and get upfield. Of course, I think it was maybe 7-on-7, something, it's not like an 11-on-11. But then later on in 11-on-11, in the young guys portion of practice, he was in the seam and caught a deep pass about 40 yards downfield from, I'm going to assume, Devin Brown. But again, I couldn't see the quarterbacks all that well because everybody in front of them. But, Tom, I want to talk about Caleb Brown, but I also want to say this is not Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba stuff. Okay, this is not, when we saw them get those guys right away, you knew that they were different. This is more along the lines of, I can't even say Chris Olave, because we started hearing about Chris Olave right away. So maybe, I don't know, what's one notch below Chris Olave as a true freshman?
Emeka Egbuka, maybe? I mean, somewhere in that range. And one thing that kind of makes me think Emeka Egbuka with him is they had him back returning punts. That's generally something. He was, I think, the third guy returning punts behind Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cam Martinez. But if you're the guy back there returning punts, well, then that's them looking for a way to get the ball in your hands, get you some touches, get you more involved because they think you might be able to, number one, if you're returning punts, they think you're someone they can probably trust to catch the ball. But number two, they're someone who they want to see with the ball in their hands. And, you think back to the guys who were returning kicks and returning punts last year for Ohio State, the younger guys who were sort of in that mix. It was Travion Henderson at kickoff return at the very, very start of the year. And then once he became the starting running back, they kind of shoved him to the side and put Emeka Egbuka in his place. The fact that they are looking at him that way, and, some of the stuff we saw, you don't ever want to read too much into one practice. And, we saw two, you will be focused on individual guys during individual plays. And if you happen to see Caleb Brown make two big plays during practice, in your head, he has just been blowing up all day. And it's like, okay, you don't want to take, you don't want to extrapolate too much from this very limited sample of plays here. But I think we have seen some stuff that's like, oh, that's maybe noteworthy. And if they've got him returning punts, that's kind of another data point that suggests like, okay, they think this kid might be ready to contribute in some form at some point this season. And for a true freshman wide receiver in what is a pretty loaded wide receiver room, like, okay, that tells me something about where they think his career could end up.
All I'm saying is he made more plays today than Marvin Harrison and Jackson Smith and Jigba combined. So do with that information what you will. I thought it was interesting. They did some 7-on-7 before 11-on-11. The top three receivers for 7-on-7, it was Emeka at Z, Marvin Harrison at X, and Jackson Smith and Jigba in the slot. Then when they go to 11-on-11, and I think at that point you turn to me and you're like, okay, here are the real starters. When we were talking about the defensive line, like, okay, well, let's see what this really looks like. The first team receivers in that 11-on-11, it was Julian Fleming at Z, instead of Emeka Egbuka. So, as we've been saying all along, I think those two guys are going to rotate in some form or fashion. What I didn't see any of Emeka doing is running from the slot. I think Xavier Johnson as the second team slot receiver, and then Caleb Brown after that somewhere else down the line. But I think this is interesting on a couple of points with Egbuka maybe no longer being that inside guy, but obviously still can do it because he's done it, and now he's fluid and flexible. Xavier Johnson doing so much that if he's in the slot, he'll still have some opportunities, but that position is a busy position, even if it's the second guy. And then, of course, Cam Babb was held out today. Just a slight little ding, basically, is what Ryan Day termed it, and nothing serious. He'll be back. I think all across every position that we saw today, like of guys who have injury histories, they were taking them pretty easy today, so don't get too worried about Cam Babb. But your thoughts on the receivers that you saw today?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that I saw was Egbuka working exclusively, I think you're right, exclusively outside, which tells me, we had talked about, hey, there's lots of different ways they could play this. They could move Jackson Smith-Njigba outside. They could, that tells me you're probably going to have Marvin Harrison pretty much locked in at the starter X, and Jackson Smith-Njigba pretty much locked in at starter at H. And then Z is going to be either a split, a timeshare between those two guys, or, a battle between those two guys in terms of who the starter is. Because Ryan Day said there are not a lot of starting jobs that are really up for grabs right now. That might be one of them at Z. And those are two guys who I think you have probably seen a little bit of, seen flashes from in their limited opportunities in their careers. Two guys who both came in with 5-star status. Two guys who people around the program keep talking about both of those guys as just really potential big impact players. So, if that's your option, one of these two guys or both of these two guys together, that's, I'm not exactly going out on a limb here, but I think the wide receivers might be pretty good. If that's, if those are the two guys who are fighting to get on the field, that's probably a pretty good indication that big things could be on the way for the wide receivers.
Yeah, and along with that, not necessarily knowing who the starter is, they also said that they will rotate. Like, the receivers will rotate, the defensive line will rotate. Those guys will all play. Tight ends, we've been saying, year of the tight end. And if you were to drop an Ohio State fan into one practice to watch to prove us correct about this being the year of the tight end, today may have been it. There's certainly a bunch of dump-offs over the middle and some 7-on-7 stuff, but Cade Stover had a couple of deep passes. He had like an 80-yard touchdown down. It wasn't even the seam. He was split out wide, and everybody else was on the other side, so he was basically alone. I know he had one coming towards us. Corner route, caught over Court Williams. Pretty effective day for the tight ends, and you know what? I'm torn. 45 catches, 65 catches, somewhere in there, Cade Stover this year. Just thinking out loud.
That would be pretty bold. I think you're probably, just based on history, you may be a little high there. We're kind of joking during practice. It's like, okay, so if you were going to try and throw Notre Dame off, the one where the Big Ten Network is there televising the whole thing, this is, oh man, they are really going tight end heavy this year. And then pow, look, ta-da, wide receivers. They'll never see this coming now. It was, it was a ton of tight end today. And, you saw a bunch of Cade Stover, you saw some Joe Royer. The guy, though, and I think G. Scott, had a nice catch or two. The guy, though, that was kind of jumped out to me was Bennett Christian. He's a true freshman, hasn't lost his black stripe yet. When, they've got guys repping in order, he's a little further up the list than you might expect for a true freshman. You saw him out there a little bit with the 1s and 2s. They're kind of mixing and matching. I definitely do not think he is the first or second tight end option right now. But he's, in the conversation enough that he's out there. He was out there with C.J. Stroud at one point and, as a true freshman, was in the wrong spot and they needed to, someone yelled at him to move from outside the tackle, inside the tackle, where he was lining up in the backfield. Just, again, this is a true freshman. This is what happens with true freshmen. But I think looking at him, I think he might be. He's someone who we talked about over the summer just being a little more physically ready, potentially to play early than some other tight ends may have been. I think, maybe you're seeing a little bit of that. And being ready to play early means maybe he's the fourth tight end this year. But, that's, and is he ahead of Mitch Rossi? Probably not in some situations. There's a lot of different, ways you could sort of figure out, first versus second versus third, whatever. But I think he's in the mix to, that if you told me he gets, 6 catches this year or something like that, that wouldn't surprise me at this point. I think he's far enough along that you might see a little bit of him this year.
I think far enough along that you won't see like Carson Hinsman or Tegra Shibola wearing 41 like Donovan Jackson did last year as a third jumbo tight end. Like he's pretty big. He's like 6'5", 250, 260. He's a good sized kid and gives them another different type of tight end. And they need more of those because they've got a bunch of the others or different types. The offensive line really no different than what it has been, and it's, we know Paris Johnson, Donovan Jackson, Luke Whippler, Matt Jones, DeJuan Jones across the front line. Still Zen Michalski as your left tackle and Enoch Vamahi as your first guard off the bench, Josh Fryer at right tackle. And really that's your top 8. And Ryan Day was talking, can they make a top 9, a top 10, something of that nature? The question now is, as Ryan Day said, who is the third tackle? Is it Josh Fryer? Is it Zen Michalski? They'll figure that out. And can one of those guys be better than just sliding out Donovan Jackson? And that depends on how good Enoch Vamahi is compared to Donovan Jackson. So it's, somebody asked on the board, does it look like you would just still slide Donovan Jackson out like they've talked about doing? And I think for me, it would be if there's a long-term issue with Paris Johnson, then maybe you slide out Donovan Jackson. If it's just a game, a couple of series, I think you go with Michalski or Josh Fryer, assuming they're all they all progress to where they need to be. But overall, the offensive line, nothing new, nothing concerning for me. One thing on Donovan Jackson, watching these drills, that dude gets so low. Like they were drilling, offensive linemen were just drilling against other offensive linemen, and they would just push and attack and push like right up against each other, and everybody else is head high with each other. And, like Paris Johnson is going against somebody and their helmets are the same height, same level. Donovan Jackson, whenever he's going against somebody, like his helmet is below the other dude's face mask. Like he just really, really gets low. And I think that's just a testament to the leverage that people talk about with him.
Yeah, I mean, he is someone who, he is not an enormous guy. And, when we talk about him as a tackle, he doesn't have the traditional tackle build. But, that's, as a guard, that's kind of an advantage because you want to be able to get a little bit low, get up under the other guy's pads. You may have heard this from football coaches at some point in the past, but Tony, it turns out low man wins. That is a thing I just learned today for the first time ever. Never heard it before, but the low man wins. So yes, that is a good thing if you can get low. That's something that can come into play during short yardage situations, what have you. So, yeah, I don't. One of the things that I struggle with in terms of evaluating the offensive line right now is you saw them in very limited situations, and this is like the spring game. You're seeing a long pass happens. Is that good because the wide receiver caught it? Is it bad because the defensive back gave up the pass? It's the same thing with the line. You're not seeing like true game situations for the most part. It's, hey, we're running a drill, and the drill is we're going to run the ball inside. So the defense knows you're going to run the ball inside. So it's probably not quite a fair fight for the offensive line. I don't see anything that I'm concerned with on the offensive line necessarily. I think I'm chalking up, some of the interior defensive line success, and we'll get to the defensive line in a minute. But there were some young guys that I was impressed with today on the defensive line. On the offensive line, how many times have we heard that you need time to gel and all that kind of stuff? And these guys it's been basically these 5 guys since early to mid spring practice. So they should be kind of pretty well working cohesively as a group at this point. But, it's I don't see anything that makes me deeply concerned on the offensive line. Oh, and one other thing on the offensive line, we did get to see Harry Miller at practice at one point today. That was good. That was nice to see Harry out there, back with the guys, and still kind of being involved and kind of around the program.
Yeah, he was helping out, and then at one point, I think he was just doing a workout on his own, doing some jogging around, and doing well. Justin Fry, watching him coach, and I may be completely off base on this because we got to see Greg Studrawa a bit, but I don't know that I was watching it closely enough as I was Justin Fry. My recollection is that Greg Studrawa would tell his players what to do and how to do it. Justin Fry shows them. Like, he'll do it if he needs to. There was one drill where they're getting the players lined up, and he was basically posing them. Like, he was moving DeJuan Jones's feet and his hips and lifting his shoulder up. Like, he was posing these guys like action figures. Like, okay, I need you right here, and then you go, like, getting them exactly where they wanted to be, where he wanted them to be, where they needed to be, and then he would tell them to go. And it was just interesting to watch and be so hands-on. And it's not just telling them, it's showing them. And they picked it up. And they would pick it up, and then they would do the drill, and they would be good. All right, no. And just almost peaceful. But he's yelling a lot, but he's not angry yelling. He's just wanting to be heard. I thought it was interesting. Tom, I'll let you talk about the defensive line if you would like.
Sure. I mean, I think the defensive line, by and large, we saw what we expected eventually. There were times, we'll be at these practices and I'll tug on your sleeve and Tony, look, Mike Hall's starting with the first team. And it's like, well, Jerron Cage isn't out there. It's like, oh, well, that would be one explanation for why Mike Hall's out there with the first team. Okay. And, Tony, look, Caden Curry's with the twos. It's like, well, Jack Sawyer's not out there right now. It's like, oh, well, okay. And then, and then you see Jack Sawyer come in later. You see Jerron Cage come back in later with the ones and all that stuff. So, in terms of depth chart, I don't know that we necessarily learned a whole heck of a lot today. I was impressed with Mike Hall. I think we've heard, when you ask people about, which second year defensive lineman is going to be, make the biggest impact, I think JT Tuimoloau is probably your first answer you're going to hear from a lot of people. And you're going to have your Tyleik Williams people, and you're going to have your Jack Sawyer people, and they're probably about, in the same neighborhood for second. And I think Mike Hall would be in fourth place there among those guys because he played, I think, the least of those four last year. He seems like he might be ready to contribute this year. He seems like he's, I don't know if he's past Ty Hamilton on the inside yet, but he's in, at least in that conversation to be, is he right behind Jerron Cage? Okay, then, but, we saw him out there with Teron Vincent at one point, with the ones. And when he was out there going up against the interior of the Ohio State starting offensive line, I mean, he looked pretty good. So I think of anyone on the defensive line, I think my biggest takeaway was Mike Hall might be a lot closer to contributing than I would have told you 24 hours ago.
Yeah, he was really impressive on those in the inside drill period of practice. He got the best of Luke Whippler a couple of times, just really, really quick. Playing nose tackle, moving like a 3-tech, and would get past Whippler and would celebrate a little bit, was a pumped up dude, was excited, certainly contributing. And that early portion of the inside period, Teron Vincent and Mike Hall were pretty dominant, and that was good to see for Teron Vincent as well. And then, then the 11 on 11 comes in, and it's Vincent and it's Jerron Cage out there as the starters. But yeah, I'm with you. Mike Hall is my takeaway from today. Did not see Tyler Friday. He's another one that just taking it easy. Right now, no long-term injuries going on other than Mitchell Melton. So just keep that in mind as we tell you, this guy was not there, that guy was not there. That's just camp. That's spring camp. That's fall camp. That's football. But yeah, Mike Hall. That was one of my, I think, 3 takeaways from today, individually, the 3 guys who stood out to me. Caleb Brown, Mike Hall, and we'll get to the last one here eventually. Anything else on the defensive line? I know people are like, what about Jack Sawyer? What about, JT Tuimoloau? But there wasn't really a lot of downfield passing to bring on the kind of pass rush in terms of watching it like that, going against tackles. But I did see Jack Sawyer get a tackle near the line of scrimmage, and again, they're supposed to not supposed to be tackling to the ground. But anybody else, in terms of depth chart, Javonte Jean-Baptiste was with the second team, and it's so fluid. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna rotate those guys no matter what. So whoever's with the first team this time is not necessarily going to get any more snaps than the people who are with the second team. To your point about they're not bringing guys to the ground. There was at one point where I don't remember which running back it was, but it kind of cut back and JT Tuimoloau was coming like straight at the side of the line of scrimmage, and it was like he would vaporize that running back. And if it had been a live play, and he just kind of like tapped him with two hands or something like that, and that's the thing. It's like you have to kind of like picture what this really would look like, and would he really have gotten there, and would he really have hit him at the right angle, or would he have gotten there just a second too late? You're also looking through we're generally up on bleachers behind the end zone when we're trying to watch this stuff, and the whole team is between us and the the drill that's happening, so you can't necessarily see everyone's jersey numbers at all times. So it's not ideal viewing situation, but there were a couple times that it was just like there is I every time I watch JT Tuimoloau, it's like you can see where the ranking, the number one player in the country kind of ranking came from, why they're so excited about him, why there's so much hype around him, why people around the program keep talking about him. He's someone who I feel like I would be very surprised if he did not have a big year. Zach Harrison was out there too. Zach Harrison, I think, is another person who I think I'm pretty high on Zach Harrison for this year. Like, I know there's he came in with the same 5-star expectations that Tuimoloau did and Jack Sawyer did. And, I think people look at him and go, what's wrong with Zach Harrison? It's like, I don't know that anything's wrong with Zach Harrison. Zach Harrison is, has been a reasonably productive player. He hasn't been super off the charts explosive. If he ends up with Jonathan Cooper's career, that's a pretty good career, and I feel like he might even potentially be able to end up a little bit ahead of that this year, depending on how that all shakes out. But yeah, he's another one who just kind of keep an eye on him. I think he's we didn't see as much of him today because they weren't playing so many as many of the veteran guys, but when he's out there, you tend to notice him.
And I would have liked to have seen more from Amari Abor and Kenyatta Jackson, the true freshman defensive ends that are new. But when it was the young guys period, they were on the far side of the field, and they were playing some basically inside the 10. So we are 120 yards away from them at that point trying to watch this, and it was unsuccessful. But again, still a great day. Along those JT Tuimoloau lines that he lays a hit in that maybe he shouldn't, or he could have that he shouldn't have. CJ Hicks had one of those today against a receiver that was coming back towards him and CJ Hicks like hit him in the seam. Basically, they ran into each other, hit him a little too hard, kind of knocked him back, and not supposed to necessarily do that at this point. But as Kevin Noon turned to me and said that that's how they practice at Alter. So, it's everything is tackle at Alter. So that was probably just a little bit of that. But CJ Hicks, as we move to the linebackers, had in that same young guys period, had an interception down the seam. He was covering the tight end. Tight end got behind him, but the throw was a little underthrown. CJ Hicks went up and got it, turned around, returned it, would have returned it for 6, but they blew the play dead. But another, as you would expect, very athletic play from CJ Hicks, and not a surprise to see him running down the middle of the field, picking off a pass, turning around and running back up the field, following his blockers into the end zone. That was to be expected. I mean, he should be making these plays. He's CJ Hicks, 5-star, number 1 linebacker. He only has 1 touchdown in camp so far. Come on. The Taraji Mitchell is working with the 2s at the mic. He and Cody Simon, I think, are going to fluctuate there throughout camp and probably throughout the season. Chip Trainum still there at the number 2 with the Will, and CJ Hicks behind him. Not a lot new with the linebackers, anything from you, Tom?
I think my big takeaway was it seems like Cody Simon is a bigger question whether he's second or third right now, versus first or second. It feels, just based on today and based on sort of what we've kind of heard throughout camp, it feels like the Tommy Eichenberg, Steel Chambers, it would be a pretty big upset at this point to me if those guys are healthy and are not, the two starting linebackers for the Notre Dame game. I think there might be a bigger gap there than we have been thinking. Simon, just every time we talk about Simon, we talk about the injuries he had last year and all that. It feels like he is, he's more battling to Roger Mitchell right now than Tommy Eichenberg in terms of, getting on the field and being a starter. So, yeah, that I think was a takeaway for me. There were a couple times that Chip Trainum flashed in that inside run drill where, he found the hole, had the right run fit, met the guy right in the hole. It was, it's a drill. There's only, 5 blockers out there and 4 defensive line, there's 7 or 14 guys on the field, whatever it is. But it was like, okay, that was, that's someone who looks like he knows sort of what he's doing at linebacker. That was, I think, a good sign to me. But yeah, other than that, I think my biggest takeaway was, I think the top 2 linebackers are maybe more written in ink than I would have thought earlier.
Yeah, ink verging on stone, I think, at this point. Chip Trainum, everybody loves that guy. Like, coaches, players love him, and it's always interesting when they like a new guy so quickly. I think that we talked about that with Jonah Jackson, where he comes in, he's looking to take somebody's job, and it turns out like he's really likable. He works hard. He does all of the right things, so it's impossible to not respect him. It's, God, I wanted to hate this guy, but I end up, I can. He's now my best friend. And, so he's one of those guys that, became a leader almost immediately, and will be interesting to see what he does this year and what they have for him. The cornerbacks, Tom, Jordan Hancock is still out. Ryan Turner, freshman corner, is still out. Jansen Dunn, who moved over a bit to corner from safety, lasted a couple of days. He got some sort of a ding as well. So I think, I'm not saying cornerback is cursed at this point, but if you want to get injured, move to corner. But no, those 3 guys were on the indoor field working out by themselves. Brian Day, again, none of these injuries are long-term. Everything is, you just want to get them back healthy. It's going to take a couple of days. But in the interim, without Jordan Hancock, without Ryan Turner, we've seen Jair Brown and J.K. Johnson really step up. J.K. Johnson rotating in with the ones today as they still have Cameron Brown on a pitch count for Ryan Day. So what would happen? The ones would go, and for a couple of plays, Cameron Brown would be out there. Then he'd come off, and J.K. Johnson would come in and finish with the ones. He had an interception today against was it C.J. Stroud? Is that what we talked about earlier? C.J. Stroud.
Yep.
Had a play right before that. The play right before that, in really tight coverage on Xavier Johnson. Johnson made a diving catch, but everybody was lauding J.K. Johnson for his coverage. So got those 2 guys stepping up in the interim, and it's certainly not a benefit, but they are at least making the most of not having Jordan Hancock out there right now.
Yeah, I think the good news as far as that stuff goes is that there are no significant long-term injuries they're dealing with there. If we were 2 weeks further into camp and these guys were still sitting out for quote-unquote little stuff, I think that would be a bigger concern to me. Right now, Cam Brown was out there. We saw him out there for, as you mentioned, on a pitch count. So, he was out there a little bit. He was able to go, and that does feel very precautionary. Hancock, we saw him, he went through some of the warm-ups out on the field and then went back to the indoor. That feels like he's okay. We haven't seen him in a limited contact jersey or no contact jersey or any of that kind of stuff. He's just been, just sort of working by himself. You're still far enough out, you're still more than 3 weeks away, just over 3 weeks away from the first game. So I think I'm willing to buy that this really is all precautionary right now. But, you're adding up. I mean, Ryan Turner, I don't think Ryan Turner is someone they're necessarily expecting to be a, rotational player or, a significant contributor this year as a true freshman. But, that's a depth hit. Jensen Dunn is a little bit of a depth hit. Not having Jordan Hancock is a, fairly significant depth hit because I think he's someone who we would expect to be, third, fourth in that rotation. So, number two, if, Cam Brown is number two, Cam Brown is, limited. Jordan Hancock, if he's number three, he's, kind of limited. J.K. Johnson is either 3 or 4, he's out there. Jair Brown is probably 5, he's out there. But, you've got the guys who are full go 100% right now are 1, either 3 or 4 and then 5. And that's, and they only have 6 guys on the roster. So we saw Cam Martinez out there, some at corner today, I think. We saw, Jensen Dunn was out there earlier working at corner earlier in the fall. I think that has to be the biggest kind of question mark / concern on the team right now, because just between only having 6 scholarship guys and having some minor injuries are still injuries. So having some injury related concerns at the position where you have the, biggest depth concerns, I think that has kind of moved to the top of my list of concerns for this team, at least at the moment.
Ryan Day said it was a top 3 concern, the cornerback position. I'm wondering what the other 2 are. And is one kicker? Is the other tight end? I don't know, but he's feeling better about the tight ends. Maybe it's quarterback depth. Who's to say? Safeties, and I figure we have to talk about Sonny Styles, who was getting work with the 2s at strong safety at one point, but previously we saw him repping in drills at free safety. Now he was over at strong safety, actually playing strong safety and that boundary, and didn't see him make any plays because the ball never really came to him. But a guy, again, should be in high school. Instead, he certainly looks like a college football player and is running in the 2 deep with the 2s essentially for the Ohio State Buckeyes in a new defense that is safety driven. And this kid here, barely old enough to drive, Tom. I think he's 14 and a half, maybe 15 at this point. Learner's permit, but it's really impressive to see. And again, you were saying Heisman the other day. I'm saying slow down. But we keep telling you to slow down, and then, hey, look, he's with the 2s.
Yeah, I do like the fact that we have turned into like the Goofus and Gallant of responsible reporting on early enrolling high school players. Just anything you get this season is a bonus. You're not, don't go in expecting nothing and be responsible about it. But yeah, I mean, he is very clearly someone that they, I think they see why he was a 5-star. I think they see the potential there. There's a lot of learning to do. There's probably still some development to do, but you pointed out when we were standing there, he was standing next to Keon Grays during warmups, and he's what, 5'6" inches taller than Keon Grays. Just very, very big, just a big dude, and still very thin right now. We saw him do some interception, intercept the ball and turn around and get upfield kind of drills, that kind of stuff. You see the athleticism there. One thing that was interesting to me was, as guys are stretching, the coaches are kind of walking around and just kind of talking to guys and whatever. There were multiple coaches who came up and were talking to him. One of them was Perry Eliano, which, okay, that makes sense. Sure, Perry Eliano as a defensive backs coach is going to be talking to him. Tony Alford at one point went out of his way to come over and talk to Sonny Styles, and it was like, that's I honestly don't know quite what to make out of that, but it's interesting that he seems to be getting quite a bit of attention. And again, let's just go into the year assuming you're going to get nothing, because he should be in high school, so you shouldn't get anything. So go into the year assuming that, and then if you get something on special teams, wonderful. If he turns into a person you can trust to play in the fourth quarter of the Arkansas State game or the Rutgers game or the Maryland game or whatever it is, fantastic. Don't just settle down, everyone. Settle down, Tony. enough Super Bowl MVP talk out of you. He's not even, he can't win the Cy Young, Tony. He doesn't play baseball. Come on, be ridiculous. Just stop being ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, he's just one of those guys where it's a little like CJ Hicks. Like you can already sort of see it. It's not, they're not ready yet. We didn't talk about Caden Curry. Caden Curry, I think a little bit has a little bit of that too. I don't, pump the brakes. Not yet. But at some point, yeah, you can absolutely see that it's in there, and we'll probably start living up to the recruiting hype at some point soon-ish.
Yeah, let's remember he has Josh Proctor and Court Williams in front of him, and it was about 2 days ago, when Jim Knowles was talking about the possibility that Court Williams could eliminate their need for a Sam. So like there are plans for guys in front of Sonny Styles. So let's see what he does on special teams. Tom, slow down. Anything else with the safeties? Again, they were the same depth chart that was before, essentially, except for Jansen Dunn not out there right now. But Lathan Ransom, Ryan Day continues to rave about him, and this is something that he's done since 2020 when he was a true freshman. But he was out there. He's the number 2 free safety right now, and you've got Lathan Ransom as your number 2 free safety, Court Williams as your number 2 strong safety, Cam Martinez as your number 2 nickel. These are all guys who have started at Ohio State, and so that's pretty good depth, assuming they can all play.
Yeah, and I think Lathan Ransom is probably a little ahead of where I thought he might be. We saw, I think, more of him than I was expecting. They're being cautious with a lot of guys, right? I mean, they're being, lots of veteran guys, and is he a veteran? It's his 3rd year. He played some significant minutes as a true freshman in 2020, so I think he probably would be considered a veteran at this point. And they were not, he wasn't out there constantly, but he was out there more than you might expect for a guy who was maybe not 100%, semi-recently. So I think that was encouraging to me, that he might be more ready to go for the season than I would have expected. But yeah, as far as the rest of the safety position, I don't know that we learned a ton today. It feels like it was, kind of mostly guys being where you thought they would be, and no real major changes there.
Special teams, still no word on Parker Lewis. Ryan Day, the same thing he's always said. Hope we hear something soon. It's always encouraging when you have no idea, but you're hoping it could be soon. Because you know what, hope it eventually works out for everybody, and so I'm assuming he will eventually be eligible, perhaps by Iowa. I don't know. Didn't really see any kicking today. There's some punting, but the number one gunners that I saw, Josh Proctor and Julian Fleming. Second team gunners, Cam Brown, which to me is a good sign, and Ja'Kalen Johnson, also a good sign. So like having faith in both of those guys. One, Cam Brown, that you're not going to do something to hurt him. Two, Ja'Kalen Johnson, that this is an important role, and he continues to, like, if he was drowning at corner, they wouldn't be dealing with him at gunner, or if he's doing well at both places, which, and at least that's what you would think, in order to allow him to take on more jobs. So that's about the special team stuff. You talked about the punt returners as well. There's no really kickoff return situations that go on, but no reason to think it's not a Mecca still.
Yeah, I have no reason to suspect it's anyone else, and they're, I'm sure, trying other people there, or there has to be a second team kick returner, right? That's kind of a thing you need. So I'm sure there is someone else being tried there, but my expectation is that it's a Mecca Igbuka until I hear otherwise. But yeah, I don't think we've seen any kick. I mean, you really don't see a lot of kickoff practice during practices. Just they don't practice it very much because it's a dangerous play where there's a lot of contact. You can't really do it half speed, so they don't practice it a lot, and it has become a smaller part of the game in general. So you kind of don't have to practice it as much as you used to. So I'm sure they will do it at some point this fall, but they have not done it in front of us yet.
Thinking Caleb Brown is that number 2 kickoff returner. I'm just going to throw that out there as again, hype train. Because you know what, Tom, eventually the 5'10" slot receiver has got to work out for Ohio State. That's law of averages is what I'm basing all of this hype on. So that's great. Anything else, Tom, from today before we go?
I think we've covered the bulk of the important stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, she's only three weeks away from the start of the season, which is pretty good. I had a dream the other night, like a very vivid dream about the Notre Dame game, and all I really remember was being on the sidelines, being like, "Oh, this is fun to be back down here." And why is Notre Dame wearing the green jerseys? They can't wear their green jerseys to the visiting team. That's weird. Not sure that was a useful thing to share, but I mean, I guess my big takeaway there is, hey, season's almost here. I'm pretty excited.
Ooh, are you suggesting home uniforms for both teams for that game? I will take that. I also had a dream about this game a couple of weeks ago. I was able to look at the scoreboard and read it, and Ohio State had rushed for 416 yards and thrown for about 195. So I did not look at the score. I don't think I needed to. Having seen that, I knew enough at that point, and I thought, you know what? It was a real struggle to read this in my dream. I know if I try to look at a score, there's just no chance. But yeah, I mean, all things looks like those boys in green are going to get stomped come September 3rd. So that will. Tom, do you have something else to add?
No, I mean, I guess I would assume if Ohio State does in fact rush for 416 yards, they probably have a pretty good chance of winning. I'm not anticipating that being exactly how the game plays out, but if it does, I would I don't know, I don't remember what the spread is right now, but whatever it is, I would probably lay the points if Ohio State's going to rush for 416 yards.
Well, we'll see. Might incorporate that into my bold predictions. But anyway, thank you all for joining us. If you're watching us on YouTube and you have not yet subscribed, please do. If you're subscribed, or if you haven't hit the bell yet, please do that as well. You'll be notified when we drop shows like this, when we go live, when we have interviews, when we have a practice video like we dropped today as well. So subscribe, hit the bell, get notified, keep up to date on everything. Thank you for joining us at this channel. Thank you for watching, listening. Reminder that we are now at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We are getting set to have a full launch on that site here in the coming days. Right now, the message board is up. It is free to register for now and post on there, and we are there. So if you want to talk Ohio State football or basketball, we are there. Baseball, whatever you got, we're there. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.